She walked into the grand hall with two children at her side, her belly round with life, and the entire room froze. The man who once called her empty suddenly couldn't breathe. Welcome to Elite Romance, where we bring you powerful, true-to-life stories filled with betrayal, redemption, and love that conquers the deepest wounds. Before we dive into today's story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss our next release, and let us know in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from right now? This tale will take you from heartbreak to hope, from public humiliation to a moment that shook an entire city. Every twist, every revelation will keep you on edge until the very last second. So lean in, stay with us, and discover how one woman's pain was transformed into the most unforgettable triumph. The city lights burned through the tall windows of Marcus's house, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Adanna sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers tightening around a handkerchief as silence pressed against her chest. For 7 years she had called this place home, yet tonight every wall felt hostile. Every chandelier above her seemed to glare with cold indifference. Marcus stormed in, his tie loosened, his jaw clenched, the heavy smell of whiskey clinging to him like armor. His voice cut through the stillness, sharp and merciless. 7 years, Adanna. 7 years of waiting and still no child. Do you want me to die without an heir? Her lips trembled, but she raised her head, refusing to let the tears fall. We have tried, Marcus. It is not in my hands. Perhaps another doctor, another chance. We can hope. He laughed bitterly, pacing the room like a caged animal. Hope? That word has mocked me long enough. My mother calls every day asking why you have failed me. My friends whisper behind my back. They laugh at the man who cannot produce a son. And you stand there with empty hands, daring to call yourself my wife. The words pierced deeper than any knife. Adanna clenched the handkerchief until her knuckles whitened, fighting to steady her breath. She wanted to shout that love was not measured by children, that she had stood by him when he had nothing, but his eyes were steel, unyielding. Marcus, do not speak as if I am nothing. I carried you through sickness. I prayed for your success. I gave you every part of myself. I am your wife, for better or worse. Do not throw those vows into the fire. He slammed his palm against the dresser, the sound echoing like thunder. What is a woman who cannot bear children? You eat my food, wear my clothes, ride in my cars, yet you cannot give me a single son to carry my name. You are a curse, Adanna, nothing more. The room tilted beneath her, the floor shifting as if it wished to swallow her whole. She dropped the handkerchief, her eyes stinging. Do not call me a curse. Every night I kneel, begging God for mercy. Do you think it gives me joy to remain barren? I am in pain too. But he turned his back, pacing faster, his shadow sliding across the wall like a predator circling its prey. Enough of your tears. I am done waiting. Tomorrow I will speak to my lawyer. This marriage is finished. The words fell like stones into her chest. Her knees weakened and she collapsed, clinging to the edge of his trousers. Divorce? After everything? After I left my family for you? After I stood by you when no one else would? Marcus, do you remember our wedding night? Do you remember the vows? You swore to love me. His hand jerked free from her grip as if her touch carried disease. Love cannot produce children. Love cannot silence the laughter of men who mock me. By morning, Adanna, you will be gone. He lifted his phone, dialed with cold precision, and spoke without hesitation. Yes, barrister. Prepare the papers. I want her out immediately. She froze, staring at him, her chest burning with disbelief. You planned this? Even before this night, you had planned to cast me aside? His tone was ice. I am freeing myself. If you love yourself, you will leave quietly. Her body shook, but she forced herself to stand. She walked to the wardrobe, her hands trembling as she pulled out dresses, folding each with care, though her vision blurred. Each garment carried a memory, church on Sundays, birthdays filled with laughter, evenings when she thought love was unshakable. Now they felt like ghosts mocking her. Marcus stood with arms crossed, his face unreadable, watching her every move, yet offering no hand, no word of mercy. When the bag was full, she struggled to zip it shut, her fingers clumsy with grief. She turned to him, her voice breaking. "You will regret this. One day you will understand the truth." He said nothing, his gaze fixed on the window, the city lights dancing across his proud silhouette. She lifted the bag, her shoulders sagging under its weight, and walked down the corridor where servants whispered but dared not meet her eyes. The grand door opened with a groan, the night air rushing in cold against her damp cheeks. She looked back one final time at the mansion she had helped build into a home, now a prison she was being cast out of. Whispering to herself, she vowed, "I may leave with nothing, but I will not remain broken. My God will fight for me." And with that, she stepped into the darkness, her slippers scraping the stone steps as the door shut behind her with a hollow thud. The street stretched out before her, dim under flickering lamps, shops shuttered, stray dogs prowling. Every step felt like a verdict, every sound amplified by the silence of her heart. His words echoed, stabbing over and over. "You are a curse. You are nothing." She hugged the bag to her chest, trembling not from the night air, but from the weight of humiliation. Passers-by barely glanced at her, unaware that the woman drifting through their neighborhood had just lost everything. Yet deep within the storm of despair, a quiet ember glowed, fragile but unbroken. The morning after her exile, Adanna woke in her cousin Miriam's modest apartment. The room was small, the paint peeling in corners, yet it carried a warmth her mansion never had. Sunlight slipped through thin curtains, brushing against her swollen eyes. She sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the same bag she had carried into the night, her heart replaying Marcus's words again and again. Empty basket, curse. Each syllable burned like fire under her skin. Miriam walked in with a steaming mug of tea, her face lined with concern. "You barely slept. What did he do to you?" Adanna tried to steady her voice, but it cracked. "He threw me out. Said I am nothing. Said I am barren." Miriam's eyes hardened, her hand tightening around the mug. "That man is blind. You gave him everything, and he gave you ashes. You won't stay broken here." Adanna lowered her gaze, whispering more to herself than to her cousin. "But what if he was right? What if it truly is me?" Miriam moved closer, placing the mug on the bedside table before gripping Adanna's hands. "You've lived under his accusations for too long. He never tested himself, did he?" Adanna shook her head slowly, shame seeping through her like ink. "He always refused, said there was no need. I believed him because I had no choice." Miriam's voice sharpened. "Then enough. We will go to the clinic tomorrow. You deserve the truth from a doctor, not from a man who uses you as a shield for his pride." The determination in her cousin's tone startled Adanna, but it planted a fragile seed in her chest. Perhaps hope, perhaps defiance. That night, as she lay in Miriam's spare bed, the ceiling cracked and uneven above her, and she whispered into the silence, "If I am not the problem, let the truth find me." The next day they arrived at a private clinic tucked between a bookstore and a pharmacy. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic, the walls painted pale green that tried and failed to calm her nerves. Adanna sat stiffly on a plastic chair, her palms damp, while Miriam filled out the forms. Each tick of the clock sounded like a hammer against her chest. When her name was called, she rose as if walking to judgment. The doctor, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Rowan, greeted them with calm eyes and steady hands. "Tell me what troubles you," Miriam answered first, her voice steady. "My cousin was married for 7 years with no children. Her husband blamed her, cast her out. She never had a proper checkup. We need the truth." Dr. Rowan nodded, his expression unreadable. "We will run a full series of tests. No assumptions, only evidence." Hours passed in a blur of blood draws, scans, and quiet instructions. Adanna felt exposed, each procedure another reminder of years wasted in silence. At times she wanted to run, to escape the cold machines and bright lights, but Miriam's firm grip kept her steady. When it was over, the doctor told them to return in 2 days. Adanna left the clinic with her head bowed, whispering under her breath, "What if Marcus was right? What if I carry the curse after all?" Miriam's reply was sharp. "No. What if he was wrong? What if the curse is his arrogance?" 2 days later they returned. Adanna's hands shook as she clutched Miriam's arm in the hallway. The doctor welcomed them into his office, flipping through papers with a faint smile. Mrs. Ease, your results are clear. Your reproductive system is healthy. Hormones balanced. Everything normal. You are capable of bearing children. For a moment, Adanna did not breathe. The world tilted, her ears ringing. She blinked at him, her voice barely audible. Nothing is wrong with me? Dr. Rowan shook his head firmly. Nothing. If there were no pregnancy in your marriage, the problem lies elsewhere, likely with your former husband. I strongly advise him to undergo tests. Tears welled, spilling down her cheeks unchecked. Her hands rose to cover her mouth as sobs broke free. Miriam jumped to her feet, exclaiming, I knew it! I knew he blamed you to hide his shame! Adanna collapsed back into her chair, crying as though 7 years of anguish poured out at once. All this time I hated myself. I begged God. I carried the weight of his scorn, and I was never the problem. Dr. Rowan's voice was gentle but firm. Do not allow another person's pride to steal your peace. When the right man comes, you will have children. Your body has betrayed no one. They left the clinic, the city alive around them, but for Adanna the world felt new. She sat on a bench outside, the sky vast and bright, her body trembling with revelation. For years I believed I was cursed, she whispered. But the curse was never mine. Miriam placed an arm around her shoulders. Now you see, you can rise from this. His lies no longer chain you. Adanna wiped her tears, her chest expanding with a strength she had not felt in years. Then I will rise. I will not let his voice be the last word in my life. The days that followed marked the slow rebirth of a broken woman. She helped Miriam with small chores at first, then ventured to the market, the scent of spices and roasted corn stirring memories of her childhood before Marcus. She rediscovered the joy of kneading dough, flour coating her hands like snow, the oven's warmth filling the tiny kitchen. One morning, she told Miriam, her eyes alight with fragile excitement, I want to open a small bakery. Not grand, not like his world, just mine. I want to create something that belongs to me. Miriam smiled, proud and relieved. Then let us begin. Your hands will heal your heart. Each step forward was shaky but real. Adanna learned to greet neighbors without shrinking under imagined judgment. She began to laugh again, a sound rusty but genuine. At night, she still remembered Marcus's cruelty, but now the memory fueled her resolve rather than her despair. She repeated to herself like a vow, I am not barren, I am not cursed, I will rise. The city that once felt suffocating began to open its arms, and Adanna walked with her head a little higher, carrying not shame, but a new beginning. The bakery smelled of warm bread and sugar, a fragrance that wrapped itself around the narrow street like a gentle embrace. Each morning, Adanna rose before dawn, kneading dough until her arms ached, watching the flames in the oven glow orange against the dark. The shop was small, just a counter, 2 wooden tables, and shelves lined with jars of flour and spices. But it was hers. Neighbors stopped by for sweet rolls, workers grabbed loaves on their way to the factory, and children pressed coins into her palm for cookies. For the first time in years, Adanna's hands built something that did not belong to Marcus, something that breathed because of her will. One afternoon, as she wiped flour from her apron, a tall man stepped inside. His hair was streaked with silver, though his face was kind, his posture calm, like a man who carried sorrow but refused to bend beneath it. He smiled gently, holding a violin case in one hand. The smell reached me down the street, he said. I couldn't walk past. Adanna forced a small smile, wary yet polite. Fresh loaves just out of the oven. What will it be? He studied the trays before pointing. 2 rolls, and make them sweet. I've had enough bitterness for today. She placed the rolls in a paper bag, her fingers brushing his coins, noticing how steady his hand was. I'm Thomas, he added. I teach music at the school nearby, and I think your bread may save my afternoons. He returned the next day, then the next. Sometimes he ordered little, sometimes more. But always he lingered just long enough to tell a story. He spoke of his students learning old hymns, of the stubborn violin that refused to stay in tune, of the wife he had buried years ago after a sudden illness. Adanna listened quietly, her hands busy, her heart cautious. Yet each time he left, the bakery felt less empty. Miriam noticed and teased, her eyes mischievous. That teacher doesn't just love bread. He loves the one who bakes it. Adanna shook her head quickly. He is kind, but I cannot. My scars are still raw. Miriam's reply was firm. Kindness is not weakness. Sometimes it is the only cure. As months passed, Thomas's visits became part of her days. He fixed the squeaky hinge on the bakery door without asking. He carried flour sacks heavier than her arms could bear. He tuned the old radio so hymns filled the air while she worked. One evening, as she closed the shutters, he stood beside her under the dim streetlight. His voice was low, steady. Adanna, you have carried pain like a soldier carries armor. But armor is heavy. You deserve peace. She froze, the weight of his words pressing into her chest. I am afraid, she whispered. Afraid to hope again. His hand hovered near hers but did not touch. Then let me carry hope with you. I won't demand it, but I will stand here until you believe again. It was not a sudden surrender, but a slow thaw. She began to walk with him after closing, listening to the rhythm of his voice blend with the night crickets. When he finally asked if she would share dinner with him, she nodded, surprised at her own courage. Their love grew quietly, not in grand gestures, but in the gentle consistency of his presence. In a small church filled with lilies and hymns, they married with only a handful of friends watching. Miriam wept the loudest, whispering, Finally, you are loved as you deserve. Thomas slipped a gold band onto her finger, his eyes steady. You are my gift, my anchor, my song. For the first time in years, Adanna felt the vows spoken over her were not chains, but wings. Together, they decided to open their home to two orphan children, a brother and a sister, with wide eyes and restless energy. The little boy clung to Adanna's dress the first night, whispering, Are you really my mother now? She knelt, holding him close, answering with certainty, Yes, you are mine, and I am yours. The girl sat silently in Thomas's lap, her fingers tracing the strings of his violin as if searching for music in his touch. Their laughter soon filled the house, chasing away shadows that had long haunted Adanna's nights. But the greatest surprise came months later. Adanna began to wake with nausea, her body weak, her spirit uneasy. Miriam urged her to see a doctor. She resisted, terrified of disappointment, until Thomas insisted, his hand firm around hers. No matter what we hear, you are already a mother, already whole. But let us know the truth. The clinic smelled of disinfectant, the same sterile air that had once revealed her innocence. She sat trembling as the nurse returned with a chart and a smile. Congratulations, you are pregnant. The words echoed in her ears, almost unbelievable. Adanna pressed her palms to her stomach, tears spilling freely. Pregnant? Truly? The nurse nodded. Truly, nearly 2 months along. Thomas leapt from his chair, laughing with joy, then pulled her into his arms. Do you see, Adanna? The curse was never yours. This is grace, overflowing. She clung to him, her sobs both broken and healed at once. That night, as they tucked the children into bed, Adanna sat by the window, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding Thomas's. I never thought I would know this joy, she whispered, and yet here it is, too much for my heart to hold. Thomas kissed her forehead, answering softly, When you were thrown aside, you thought life ended, but life had just begun. Her bakery grew busier, her family louder, her nights filled with the rhythm of love instead of the silence of regret. She no longer walked with her head bowed, but with pride, her steps carrying the weight of survival and the promise of tomorrow. The woman once branded barren now held within her the seed of new life, and she understood at last that faith had not failed her. It had only waited for the right time. The city glowed with gold that evening. Banners stretched across the boulevard announcing Marcus's grand charity gala. Limousines lined the curb outside the waterfront hall, and flashes from cameras cut through the dusk like lightning. Inside, chandeliers blazed against ceilings, painted with angels, and violins played in rehearsed harmony. Waiters carried trays of wine, politicians shook hands, and Marcus stood at the center of it all, wearing his white tuxedo like armor, his smile sharp as glass. Tonight was his moment, and he wanted the world to see the man who had shed the past like an old coat. He whispered to his aide, Make sure she sits in the front. I want her to see what she lost. Far across town, Adanna stepped from her modest car, not into shame, but into light. Her golden dress shimmered against the night, her hair swept back, her belly full with life. One child held her left hand, another her right, while Thomas walked proudly at her side. The Rolls-Royces outside seemed gaudy compared to the quiet strength of her presence. She felt the stairs before she reached the entrance, heard whispers ripple through the crowd. A reporter gasped, "Isn't that Marcus's ex-wife? Look, she has children and she's expecting." Adanna straightened her shoulders, her steps calm, her heart steady. Tonight she was not here to bow, but to stand. When the great doors opened and she entered the hall, silence cut through the music. Guests froze mid-sentence, mid-sip, eyes fixed on the woman who had once been cast aside. Marcus saw her and felt his throat tighten. His confident grin faltered, his hand clenching the glass stem until it cracked. The sight of her, glowing with dignity, flanked by children and Thomas's steady presence, struck harder than any insult. He tried to breathe, but each inhale felt like drowning. He forced a laugh, too loud, too brittle. "Well, look who decided to join us." Adanna met his gaze but did not flinch. "You invited me, Marcus. Did you expect me to hide?" Her voice carried, firm yet calm, and murmurs spread like wildfire. Marcus stepped forward, anger slipping through his polished mask. "So you bring strangers to pose as your family? Is this how you seek attention?" Before Adanna could speak, Thomas moved closer, his voice deep, unwavering. "They are not strangers. They are our children, and she is my wife. You may have broken her once, but you will not touch her now." The words hit the hall with the weight of truth, and a wave of applause broke out among the guests. Marcus's mother, seated near the front, covered her face with trembling hands, tears slipping through her fingers. Marcus's fury erupted. "Lies! She could never give me a child. That is why she is here, to humiliate me." Adanna placed a hand on her stomach, her eyes locked on him. "And yet I carry life within me. The curse you placed on me was never mine to bear. You refused the truth, Marcus, and tonight the truth has come for you." The hall gasped as the reality sank in. Business partners exchanged uneasy glances, whispers turning sharp. One man muttered, "So it was him all along. He blamed her for hiding his shame." Unable to endure the storm, Marcus's mother rose to her feet, her voice shaking but clear. "It was pride that blinded us. I stood by as my son destroyed a good woman. I knew he refused to be tested, yet I let him point the finger. Forgive me, Adanna. We were wrong." The admission broke whatever mask Marcus still wore. His face drained of color, his hands shook, and the hall no longer saw a titan of business, but a man stripped bare. Guests turned away, investors whispered about contracts to be cut, and the cameras captured every falter, every crack in his facade. Marcus stumbled toward her, desperation clawing through his chest. "Adanna, wait. Do not do this here. Do not ruin me." She did not step back, nor did she raise her voice. "I came only to be seen, not to destroy. Your ruin is your own doing." Her children tugged at her hands, their innocent eyes wide, but she smiled down at them gently. "Come, my loves. We have no reason to linger." With grace sharper than any blade, she turned, her family following, leaving Marcus standing alone in the blaze of the chandeliers. The evening unraveled into chaos. Reporters swarmed, guests exited in murmurs, and Marcus collapsed into a chair as if the ground had finally swallowed his pride. Hours later, when the hall was empty and silence echoed against gilded walls, he sat hunched, staring at the shattered glass in his hand. For the first time, he felt the weight of loneliness settle like iron on his chest. Days later, he appeared at Adanna's bakery, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The scent of bread filled the air, but he seemed deaf to it, his gaze fixed on her. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I let arrogance blind me. I hurt you beyond repair. Forgive me." Adanna wiped her hands on her apron, meeting his eyes with calm resolve. "You did not just hurt me. You tried to erase me, but I am still here, and I am whole." Marcus's shoulders sagged, tears slipping down his cheeks. I do not deserve it, but please, your forgiveness is all I ask. She stood silent for a long moment, then finally said, I forgive you, Marcus, but forgiveness is not a return. My life is no longer yours. He bowed his head, broken yet oddly relieved, and walked into the street, swallowed by the crowd. That night, Thomas sat at the piano, soft notes filling the bakery as their children laughed around the tables. Adanna stood by the window, her hand on her belly, watching them with quiet joy. The world outside could whisper, but inside this room, she had everything. Love, family, peace. She whispered to herself, from ashes to beauty, from curse to blessing. And she knew the story of her life was no longer tragedy, but triumph. Thank you for staying with us through this unforgettable journey of love, loss, and redemption. Stories like Adanna's remind us that no voice of doubt can erase the strength within, and no betrayal can silence the hope of a new beginning. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What part of this story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where in the world you're listening from. Don't forget to subscribe to Elite Romance so you never miss the next tale of resilience and love. Until we meet again, may your heart stay strong and may your own story shine brighter each day.